Hey, guess what, guys? I just got back from Europe. And while I was there, a great many number of my assumptions about art have begun to be challenged. So today, I thought we would talk about my 5 bad assumptions about art. Now, seeing as many of these thoughts were thunk while I was in Europe, it seems only appropriate that, let's show vlog footage. That way we get real-time visuals that go along with my thought process change. In the interest of including all the beautiful and interesting things I experienced in Europe, even when things aren't directly correlative with the assumption, I'm going to be including clips throughout the entirety of this video. Let's begin. Assumption number 1, creativity can exist within a vacuum. What does that mean, Robin? It means that you can be creative without sourcing any external visual or experiential inspiration. But Robin, that's not something I've ever said to myself. Yeah, duh. This isn't what I would call a conscious assumption people have, but looking back on life, tell me if you can relate. This is so exciting. I think of so many times in high school, sitting with my sketchbook, feeling completely uninspired, grasping for ideas out of my own brain to no avail whatsoever. This is an idea I've been promoting a lot on this channel recently because I've been having a lot of experiences outside of my bubble, and it's brought me a lot of inspiration. This trip is no exception. In fact, it only serves to amplify this feeling. I've said it once, I can't say it enough. You need to source inspiration and life experiences to inform your work. Creativity doesn't exist in a vacuum, folks. Use your life experiences to get inspired. Okay, but now some real tea. I think that's cringy a little bit. Is that bad? Assumption number 2. I don't like Vincent van Gogh. Europe was a 9-day trip, 9 different flights, 3 different countries, and a whole ton of art. The very first country I visited was the Netherlands, and in Amsterdam is the Van Gogh Museum. Hi! I just went through the Van Gogh Museum. You're not allowed to have pictures or videos, so I didn't. Unfortunately, Van Gogh Museum doesn't allow you to take footage or pictures inside, so I'll have to supplement with some other stuff, but here is why this assumption was so challenged and something very inspiring I'd like to share with all of you. The museum is structured thus way. You kind of go through the timeline of Van Gogh's life, starting from his early years, his inspiration, his friends, different work he was being exposed to, and you get his story. Now, Van Gogh is really well known for being that man who cut off his ear and struggled with mental health and never found success in his lifetime as an artist. There's so much more to Vincent van Gogh than that. One day before I left for Europe, I had my 27th birthday, so this little nugget of information was especially inspiring to me. I just turned 27 3 days ago. Van Gogh didn't even get started painting until he was 27. Van Gogh didn't even step into being an artist until he was 27 years old, and he spent the next 10 years of his life creating such prolific amounts of work. He's one of the most famous artists of all time. Starry Night is arguably one of the most famous artworks of all time, and yet he only worked from 27 till 37 when he died. During that time, he worked so prolifically he made 1 or more pieces a day for a number of years, and some of those years he even spent institutionalized. It was really interesting seeing some of the pieces he made while he was in the psychiatric center and the emotions he conveyed through color use. I'm really inspired after this trip and in love with Van Gogh for 2 reasons. Number 1 being that seeing that amount of dedication to work just burns in you that dying passion that you have about making pieces in the first place, and seeing someone who's just so consumed with it. Do you get that feeling? Can you imagine making 1 to 2 pieces every single day? Now, I don't know if that's a balanced life, but I can tell you it creates this burn inside of me that just makes me want to paint so badly. The second thing that was so amazing about Van Gogh were his color choices. I never really fully appreciated all of the addition of the colors and the mark making, and there's just areas where you look and unless you're looking for them, there's such unexpected colors put in areas, but you don't even notice them. like in the eyelids, the crease, he would use a bright red to make the crease at the end. He had like a little dark color right here, but then this was bright red, which is beautiful. I feel very inspired to get a little more maybe impressionist, or just do some more unexpected color use in paintings, which is great. I'm so glad we went to this. And look at this beautiful park area, these beautiful trees. What a great day. You've seen the PC strokes, the brush mark, the impressionistic work that he made, but actually experiencing them in person made me appreciate his paintings on a level that I never did before. Piece after piece was so beautiful and visually compelling. The colors made sense, but when you looked at it up close, it was so surreal. He had this kind of fisheye lens on so many of the spatial pieces he made. Pieces like his bedroom, which he reflected on as one of his best pieces. So I was wrong. I like Van Gogh. Assumption number 3, all historic art is boring and the same. I'm sorry if you're a big art history buff, but I think that's honestly part of what turned me off to it. Studying art history before I had the love for education that I do now, I saw it in these bulks of what artists made and how they were all the same, and I never got drawn into any of the pieces. While I was in France specifically, I saw a ton of historic work in the Notre Dame, the Palace of Versailles, and in the art mecca, the Louvre. I want to be close so you can hear it. Filming?
Go ahead.
Hello, I'm at the Louvre. I spent the majority of my time in the Louvre in the Italian Renaissance section, starting with the Mona Lisa, which was a zoo, and moving outward. This assumption about historic art being boring is kind of similar to assumption number 4, so I'm going to group them together and tell you assumption number 4. Academic study is overrated. Part of the reason historic art that I looked at from the Renaissance was so inspiring and intriguing is because of the academic study to it. People like to think that art isn't serious or hard, but when you look at what these people accomplished, it is next level. We're not talking about a soft subject. We're talking about a very academic understanding of things like light and anatomy. These people didn't have reference photos. Going through Versailles, there were a lot of images of war imagery. War was a big deal to the aristocracy at the time, and they hallowed it. There were massive paintings of war scenes, people's bodies overlapping, muscles straining, horses reining up on their hind legs. I'm sure that they had figures that they could study live from, but there's a certain level of understanding you just need to know to fudge those kinds of scenes. Things like the way light is going to come through and hit all of these different bodies, the way certain muscles are going to be strained over prolonged periods of time. You can't get a horse to pose in these warlike scenes. And the way they treated the medium of oil paint was so beautiful. The vibrancy of the colors. I wish I could see these paintings in their heyday. As is, years later, they're beautiful, and there's a punch and a vibrancy to the blues and the reds, but they handled the medium so well. There was a softness to all edges while still having the concreteness of these structural figures with real dimension. If you know anything about art history, it's been built up in increasing realism and naturalism, and then hit a certain point and then reacted against that, went into abstraction, new mediums, new genre, video, performance. The classical period is at the height of people trying to understand and naturalistically portray softness in the skin, illusionary technique for creating dimension, popping color and contrast. If this name doesn't sound familiar to you, maybe the artwork will. Kehinde Wiley is deeply inspired by classical portraiture. He's the artist who made Obama's portrait recently.
First, Wiley photographs his subjects, asking them to pose in classic positions.
Art should take the familiar and represent it in such a way that it gives us hope.
Thinking about his work recently and seeing these paintings, he's been able to take such masterful works and reimagine them with those who were underrepresented in art at the time or virtually not represented at all.
It's a great statement about, imagine poor people in charge, people who are struggling, now the heroes.
This is crazy. All the aristocracy lived here together and was completely out of touch with the outside world. And it was just a very lavish experience. while people are literally starving outside. The context of that history is pretty heavy. So with that in mind, we're going to see some really beautiful architecture and ornate interiors. But this is the place. There's so much we can do currently to react to things from the past, ways that we can challenge it or that we can grow from it. And honestly, I just didn't realize how much visual impact and inspiration there was to find in these works. Assumption number 5. One day I'll arrive as an artist. I see a lot of commentary from people thinking that they would like to be as good as I am one day. I had the notion in my head, I think at some point, that you get so practiced over time that you feel like you've arrived. Looking at all this classical artwork, these masters of their craft, is a huge reminder to me of how much I still have yet to learn and the ways I want to rededicate myself to my work. Thinking about the Italian Renaissance and wanting to come into my own Renaissance, a rebirth of my dedication to my artwork. There was a time when I was in college that I did a much more academic study of painting. I felt involved in ideas and representation, creating a body of work that had a consistent narrative and really played into things that I cared about on a personal level, visually or conceptually. One of the biggest lessons I've learned as I've gotten older is that the more you learn, the more you realize you have yet to learn. You may come into a style, but artists change and people change. And there's a continual process to learning and growing that I think is so important. Going back to our earliest assumption, it ties back into this idea of creativity existing within a vacuum. In my personal life, I have some reconsideration to do with how I structure my time so that I can be giving more of myself to my artwork, because it's a value of mine and something that I miss. I'm feeling really inspired from this trip and a certain energy, a surge from seeing people who dedicated their lives to the mastery of this craft. There's so much visual beauty and inspiration present and available all over, and we're so lucky to have the internet where we can access images of pieces that would otherwise be completely inaccessible to us. Bringing in the life philosophy of looking for inspiration and education in all things that you do brings a certain elevated enthusiasm and excitement to any experience you can have. After this trip, I'm really excited to try to sink into some of that inspiration and to really explore other artists and visual experiences that I can learn from. It's always good to get out of your bubble and realize what bad assumptions you're making and how you can be proven wrong so that you can grow. What are some bad assumptions you guys have had about art? Do you relate to any of these? If you want to see how my art is shaped and influenced by this trip, you can follow along on my Instagram where I post all my new artwork. I'm also on Patreon, Facebook, and Twitter under the name Robin Sealark, and I have a website, robinsealark.com. If you are interested in more reference material and you like some of the stuff you saw from these vlog clips, I will have a series of reference photos from my Europe trip that I will be uploading to my $5 tier on Patreon. That's where I post reference photos for unlimited use, so if you want to, you can sign up on my Patreon at Robin Sealark. Before this is over, I do want to say a huge thank you to my friends who made this such an amazing trip, and to specifically Zach Pass, who helped with some of the footage and took amazing photographs, and to Dashel Wolf, who also contributed video clips to this video. And if you want to check out their social links, they will be down below. Zach owns a photography business based in Salt Lake. Dash is in a movie that you can stream on Amazon Prime. I'll leave information about that down below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Please subscribe. Bye-bye.